Ew, what the frick?
Chrono Trigger. Though absent from the SNES Classic and Nintendo Switch Online, it's regarded as one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made. This review is mostly spoiler-free. I won't ruin any major plot points, but if you currently know nothing about the game and seeing footage from the early game, including bosses and characters without context, is upsetting to you, you should just play the game yourself because you're clearly already invested. Have fun. It's a turn-based RPG, its focus is on story and strategy. I'm not going to detail any specific strategies or story twists. But hey, if you're sensitive about very minor spoilers, you've been warned. The easiest way to play the game these days is either on Steam or mobile. The DS version is apparently quite good if you can get your hands on it, but stay away from the PlayStation version as the load times will drive you crazy. There were animated cutscenes added to the PlayStation version you can watch on YouTube, but wait until you beat the game or you may find spoilers. Personally, I'm playing it on the Wii U, through the Wii channel, since it was never brought up to the Wii U eShop. Convoluted, but it works with an SNES Classic controller plugged into a Wii remote, so that's pretty cool, and it's a faithful port of the SNES version. I've never been much of an RPG guy, especially JRPGs, and it's because of this game. At 9 years old, I wasn't interested in reading and strategy, planning an attack, healing characters, studying enemy weaknesses. Chrono Trigger was the only game I picked up with my Super Nintendo, and boy was I disappointed. I was looking for action platforming, Super Mario World specifically, something familiar to the games I'd played up to that point on the NES and Game Boy. But I was persuaded that Chrono Trigger would be the best game to get since I could only afford one game. As a kid, I struggled with knowing what to do next in Chrono Trigger, and within the first hour of this game, I was lost. I got confused by this part yet again playing through it now as an adult. It's like a certain amount of time simply needs to pass, or I need to muck around more at the fair, or I need to speak to the same random NPCs again after another story beat takes place. I still don't know. The game wants to tempt me to steal this guy's lunch, but I know I'm not supposed to. That was burned into my brain as a kid, but I'm not actually sure how consequential it really is. I remember restarting my game upon learning later in the story that this guy was upset about me eating his lunch though. As a kid, eventually I made it to the game's first boss, and lost. I didn't know what I did wrong. I attacked over and over, but it wasn't enough. I didn't have the patience for it, and I didn't understand the mechanics. Tonics heal your HP, by the way. The few times I tried to go back to Chrono Trigger were similarly unsuccessful. I got a bit further, but hit a boss that beat me down. I'd then take a break from the game and never end up going back to it because I'd rather play something on the N64 or later, the GameCube. Now, after all these years and many games played since, I get it. Pokemon helped me grasp the basics of turn-based gameplay and enemy weaknesses. Playing through Final Fantasy V and VII in my late teens is when managing a party of characters finally clicked in, and it seems every modern game has armor and weapon upgrades you need to pay attention to and optimize. Abilities are trickled out slowly, and it actually feels like I got the time to learn how they work and when to use them. I wasn't overwhelmed by new things, and wasn't bored by a lack of new things. It's worth trying out all the new abilities as you acquire them. Doing this helped me greatly as the game got harder because some of the best attacks use two of your characters acting together. This means pacing your attacks out so that the right characters are ready to attack at the same time, and it will influence which characters you keep in your party of 3. Magic types have greater or weaker effects against different enemies, as well as using physical versus magic attacks. It's fun and frustrating to find out which enemies are immune to physical attacks and which enemies gain health back when you attack with magic. Fortunately, this isn't abused and you can usually just swing away against most enemies, and being able to see the enemies coming lets you prepare your party accordingly. However, I settled into a groove with 3 characters and stopped using others, which proved to be a bit of a problem in certain situations. So it's not a bad idea to bring out less used characters and level them up a bit. Unused characters still level up while not in your party, but they don't accumulate tech points, which is how they unlock new abilities. Something I didn't learn until much later than I should have is that you can swap characters in and out at almost any point while not in battle, after a certain point in the game. They have a hilariously dumb in-universe reason for not being able to have more than 3 characters in your party. It throws off the space-time continuum. It's not like some JRPGs where you just take turns beating on each other, or at least it gives you the impression of a bit more going on. Enemies move around and change their stance. They'll have counterattack periods or animations where their defense is greatly increased. Their physical location as they move around can also affect how they fight back, and how they take damage. Sometimes this is broadcast through text, but sometimes it's just implied by the animation. In the case of this slime, I had no idea why I was doing 6 damage sometimes, and other times 1 damage. There are hidden items that can give you an advantage in early battles, and that was fun to discover. I definitely missed these as a kid, so a bit of careful exploration is rewarded. You can increase the battle speed, which helps get through sections that force you into a lot of battles. It is annoying when you clear an area, leave it, then have to go back through it and all the enemies are back. Though it is nice, you can usually see and avoid enemies, which is different from games where you just have random encounters. When I was younger, I would skip every battle I could, which led me to disaster. Not fighting the battles means not leveling up, and the bosses will then kick your ass. I think skipping battles is more about backtracking and exploring, which I appreciate. When you do get forced into a battle when you're just passing through, it's actually pretty annoying, but nowhere near as bad as most RPGs. I think Chrono Trigger was praised for this difference when it was first released, and still praised for it today. Having the battles take place in the area you're actually in, rather than loading a separate battle scene, helps keep the pace quick and battles feel way less out of place. Still, some battles are frustratingly slow, where you have a bunch of enemies on screen and they're all attacking one at a time at a painfully slow pace. What's an RPG without some puzzles? There is a pretty heavy puzzle element throughout a lot of the endgame, especially involving time travel. It is a lot of fun to have those aha moments when you realize there's something in the past you can do to affect the present. There are also some minor puzzles that just require trial and error and exploration. I'm not a big fan of these, honestly, but these probably have something to do with the limitations of the technology at the time. Save points are available before every major boss, which is an excellent game design choice. At these points, you can use shelters which fully heal HP and MP. You can also save anywhere on the overworld map. The first 4 hours of the game are a total whirl, and the pacing is actually really good, if you're not dying to bosses. I made a point of fighting everything I saw, but didn't do any extra grinding during this first part. The game doesn't exactly hold your hand and tell you exactly what to do the whole way through, but it's good about dropping clues most of the time. Pretty early on, you meet a new ally that mentions we should search the environs, and that means press the A button on everything around you. I, instead, left the building to search anywhere but where I was meant to search. That put me on high alert during any text or exposition, but sometimes it would be useless information and my A button mashing would lead to nothing. I got lost again when a character said, "Let's go home," and didn't actually tell me how to do that. I was lost in time and couldn't just walk home, but I guess the implication was that I should go back to the point where I entered this time period. Again, not holding my hand, but with a bit of logical deduction, I found my way. Maybe I've become spoiled by games these days, but I'm sure I got lost here as a kid too. Maybe I'm just a dum-dum. One of the things that will make me hate a game is feeling like my time isn't being respected. While the game often gives you pretty obvious clues about where to go next, I kept a notebook to jot down certain things characters would say that seemed like important information. I hate getting stuck in these kinds of games because I simply wasn't reading carefully enough. Streaming and recording the gameplay helps if I need to recall something, but a few simple notes are fine if you're paying attention. Learning about the true stakes of the game comes at around the 3 to 4 hour mark, and the game kicks into hero making mode. Like in many RPGs, you need to save the world, but this game makes it interesting with the time travel aspect. I came across a couple areas while playing early in the game where it was clear I wasn't supposed to know what to do in the area. These areas weren't far off the main path and I wasn't able to progress through them at all, so it wasn't annoying and only made me curious. I made a note of these areas in case they were referenced later. Now, I hit a boss around the 6 hour mark that was really giving me trouble. I needed to constantly revive and heal, slowly chipping away at the boss. I beat it on my first try, but it felt like I was underpowered. Or maybe that's the correct balance, and being on the edge of failing is the point. How else would a game like this be difficult? If I had grinded a bunch, I would have probably breezed through it. There was another time in the first 7 hours where I was stuck in an area and it seemed like I literally just needed to spend enough time walking around without a purpose before I was able to progress. This sort of thing annoys me. Getting stuck usually comes down to just missing a detail of text or a misinterpretation of what a character said, or not remembering exactly where to backtrack to. It doesn't help when certain characters refer to items that have a different name in your inventory or to other characters, but I guess that's part of the puzzle solving. Still, I went crazy in a few places, completely backtracking through certain sections of the game for no reason, adding hours to my overall game time because I thought I must have missed something. In one situation, I actually had the item I was questing to get because the game didn't make a big deal of me acquiring it. I found it easy to get turned around in some of the dungeons, but it could be because I was trying to explore thoroughly and find useful items. Again, I'm sure I added a ton of time to my game clock just running in circles. Now and then you'd find an area with multiple paths. One path will take you further into the dungeon and another path will usually end with an item in a chest. I just wish I didn't have to fight my way back through enemies if I decide to explore. Later areas have many more forced battles and fewer you can run past, but I'm still glad the battles aren't just random encounters. About 14 hours in, I hit a boss that just demolished me. I wasn't exactly having trouble up to this point. I was playing smart, having one character heal in most boss battles while the other two attacked and supported. I was paying attention to the on-screen notes telling me about boss weaknesses and strengths, and the game usually does a good job of nudging you towards strategies that will work. But this particular boss just wrecked me with no chance and no indication of what I did wrong. I resorted to a guide after this death because I was just so severely outclassed I thought I must be doing something seriously wrong. The guide gave some info that wasn't mentioned in the game directly, but there were things I could have picked up on from a previous boss fight that seemed inconsequential at the time, yet proved to be directly related. I'm trying not to spoil it for you here. Obviously, I'm not going to show the boss I died to. Anyway, I could have figured it out on my own by going through my footage, but not everyone is recording the whole game as they play, so I can see a lot of people resorting to a guide for some boss fights. It was soon after this boss where the game opened up to multiple paths. There's a lot you can do, or skip it and go right to fight the end boss. The side quests aren't really side quests though, and they all lead to weapons and armor you'll be much better off having before the final boss. The game features a New Game Plus mode, and you can explore the alternate endings that way by replaying the game up to this point and facing the final boss with or without doing these endgame quests. I spent an additional 7 hours from this point, basically getting lost every 20 minutes, or at least that's how it felt. I completed every little quest to get geared up for the final boss, and couldn't imagine not playing that way. A lot of my final 7 hours was spent simply lost, talking to every NPC I could in every time period. I overlooked some really simple things, including which characters I should have in my party when talking to certain NPCs. I'm sure I could have easily shaved several hours off my final time if I wasn't such a dum-dum. The game gives you clues. Follow them. The music is fantastic, even in its outdated 16-bit way. I found many of the game's themes to get stuck in my head and I'd be humming them in the shower. Of course, like many RPGs, the battle music is overused and gets very repetitive. At least it's good. The graphics are delightfully retro and some of the best the SNES had to offer. It looks best on an old CRT TV, but most people won't have that option these days. The setting and mood changes throughout the different time periods, each feeling quite distinct and unique, and I was surprised by some of the areas near the end of the game as they really start to mix up the aesthetic. The story is told mostly through the main characters interacting with each other and the NPCs they're close to. Again, like most RPGs, you can learn a lot about the world through random NPCs scattered throughout the game, and I didn't feel overwhelmed by the amount of text. There was just enough context to be satisfied and feel invested in the fate of the inhabitants. The characters are fun and unique, the plot is amusing and can surprise you at times, and the story progresses at a nice pace throughout the whole game. If I wrote a review when I first played the game in 1996, I would have said, "Dumb game, can't jump, second boss impossible." Now I can say, fun game, cool story and setting, wouldn't recommend as your first turn-based RPG unless you're willing to do some extra research. Honestly, I'd probably recommend Pokemon as your first turn-based RPG. It's just so simple and teaches the basics really well. If it wasn't for my 25 extra years of gaming experience, this game might still frustrate me. There are rules and mechanics that aren't immediately explained or apparent, and it wasn't until this playthrough that I discovered the tutorial house in the beginning of the game where you can learn some basics. If you're playing the game for the first time now, I'd recommend looking for a Chrono Trigger for Beginners guide that just goes over some basics in a modern video format. Turn-based RPGs have never been one of my favorite genres. I've always been more attracted to games that rely on raw thumb skill and reflexes, like platformers, shooters, racing games, etc. RPGs require thinking, planning, paying attention to details. However, a lot of modern games of any genre have brought in RPG elements, and Pokemon exists. That's probably why I found this playthrough to be a breeze when it comes to mechanics. I know how leveling and gearing up works now. I can compare it a bit to how crafting is in so many modern games now, and I found being dropped into Minecraft to be incredibly frustrating my first time. However, after playing Animal Crossing for the past year, with its super simple take on crafting, I actually understand Minecraft now. After finally beating Chrono Trigger, I feel confident about the other RPGs on my backlog. Like they're going to be easier because I refreshed my memory on how these games work. From start to finish, the game took me about 23 hours to complete. I started to lose patience at the end, but it's my own fault. I had in my head that the game could be beaten in 17 hours, which is probably true, so as I crept further and further past that point, I got increasingly frustrated at how many walls I'd hit. I resorted to an online guide a couple of times, including for a boss fight and a single quest step. The boss fight tip was for a boss that had a simple trick that you can only discover through random trial and error, and the quest step I really didn't need, I was just being impatient. I used a guide for the final boss after a very long fight that seemed to be going nowhere, only to discover I was on the right track and just needed to keep slugging it out. It did focus me into a more precise strategy though, and may have saved me from failing the fight and wasting another hour. By the end, I was just ready to be done, but that has more to do with me and the 118 other games on my backlog. For the most part, I got unstuck every time just by talking to everyone in the world in each time period. Eventually, I'd find a clue. Occasionally, I'd backtrack into an area and waste a bunch of time refighting battles, but that served to gain me a few extra character levels and rule out the area as somewhere I needed to go next. So, should you finally play Chrono Trigger? If you like turn-based RPGs, yes. This game has influenced the genre in many ways and arguably still does it better. If you don't like turn-based RPGs, you may after playing this one. It's shorter than most, the story and characters are quite charming, it doesn't beat you over the head with exposition and lore, and if you don't feel like wasting any time, just use a guide when you're unsure of where to go next. Now someone go back in time and tell my 9-year-old self there's more to life than jumping on Goombas. Go read a book and play Chrono Trigger already. That kid really needs a smack. Wait, I did that already. Time travel is weird.